Hello and welcome back to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name's George Brown and I'm the editor at Guns on Pegs. And as usual, I'm joined by Chris Horn, managing director of Guns on Pegs. Chris, it's our first episode recording since the new year, so Happy New Year to you and Happy New Year to all of our listeners as well.
Indeed, Happy New Year. And by the time this goes out, it's probably verging on awkward saying that anymore, isn't it?
Probably.
I haven't quite worked out when the last day it is that you actually say Happy New Year.
I mean, there was a guy at our cricket club who used to love saying Happy New Year when he saw you in April.
Just because it was his first time he saw you type
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Good lad. I mean, well, look, Happy New Year means obviously it's January, which means it's the last month of the season. And I don't know about you, but I'm sensing a lot of excitement about there's people cramming in last minute days. I don't know if you've seen the stats on the site, they're picking up.
Yeah, it's been really interesting actually. Everybody kind of gets to this time of year and goes, heck, there's only 3 more opportunities, 3 more weekends. I better get a day or 2 in, hadn't I?
Yeah, there's a lot more impulse attitude out there, which is quite good fun. And obviously on my side, I've had a bit of a drier season because of a baby and things, but it's January means it's just the last opportunity to get back out there, and it's happening. The diary is looking quite good actually.
Well, yeah, and of course we've got the podcast shoot day to look forward to at the very end of the month as well. So is that all you've got in? Well, maybe we'll come on to that later.
Of course not. But the podcast shoot day, I'm so excited about because that's now full. And we've had Wild and Game confirm a whole load of really lovely foodie bits to go on the day. These are the guys that produce like game pasties and pies and things like that. So that's all in. Everyone's going to be in the hotel. I'm so excited about that one.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And those, like, you've kind of underplayed the Wild and Game pasties and pies and stuff. I mean, we basically lived off them at the game fair.
This is true. We did, didn't we?
They're very good.
Yeah, they are. So we'll be having those on the day. Thanks to those guys. And more to come. But George, go on then. You better tell us for the first time the other way around. Who's our guest today?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're doing things in a slightly different order today, and I'm doing the intro. And that is because our guest today is somebody who I have known for, I think, more or less my whole life. But most importantly, I can't think of anybody who's better placed to talk about our theme this week, a topic very dear to my heart, which is the farm shoot. His family farms about 5 miles from our family farm here in Hampshire, and alongside a wide variety of other farming and non-farming enterprises, he's been running their private family shoot there together with his dad for several years now. I've been fortunate enough to go and shoot with them a few times over the years. He's a keen and annoyingly accurate shot. He comes and shoots with us here at home as well. He's even been known to turn out and beat for us when we've been short-handed as well. And this summer, he will be best man at my brother's wedding. So if nothing else, this is a good opportunity for him to try out some of his material for his speech. A very warm welcome to Sam Burge.
Crikey, I don't know where to start there. A lot of inaccuracies to start.
What, like the bit about being a great shot?
That was the biggest. Yeah. But I was my first thing is that your podcast shoot day is full, so I'm not quite sure why I'm here offering my services to you.
Oh, I don't think the beating line's full.
Oh, right. Very good.
It's annoying when we have our guests on and we say like things like, "Oh, they're a very accurate shot." We need a way of like demonstrating that or trying that out on the podcast, don't we?
No, not at all. I think I'd rather it left to people's imagination. But no, he's being very kind, but he's unfortunately not. He's as inaccurate as my shooting. Unfortunately, I suffer. I've got awful eyesight, so I don't see till very late. So a lot of snap shooting, but good fun. And when asked the other day, someone asked my wife how bad my eyesight was. She said, well, he sees what he wants to see. And they questioned and said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, arses and partridge.
Brilliant.
So if your eyesight isn't that great, then how on earth? George isn't lying when he says you're a good shot. I know George knows what he's talking about there. So that's even more of a feat.
No. Unfortunately, he's being very kind, but I'm not. But I think I'm bad enough that I keep getting asked back. So that's the best thing.
Very good.
Well, Sam, it's great to have you with us today. Like I said, you've got a lot going on. I know you're very busy, so
No, not at all.
it's great
And
to have you with us.
apologies, I've got a croaky voice as well, unfortunately. So,
What's the cause of that?
big day out shooting on Saturday, and in that rain, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and kids gone back to school and brought back everything, and
Yeah, I mean, I was out in that rain on Saturday as well, and it was seriously wet.
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Right, well, since you've got a sore throat, we better get on with it. So, Sam, what's that you're drinking?
So, yeah, very, very last minute. Sorry about that. So I'm armed first of all with a lemsip, which I haven't hot toddied up or anything. So a straight lemsip there, and then I was gonna have a gin and tonic, but I'll come on to that. And then I'm on a Dorset craft cider, which is from Purbeck Cider, which is fantastic. Actually, we've got a few boxes of that in the garage. And then this shows the caliber of the kind of people that we invite onto our shoot. Someone bought this as a guest bought this as a gift last week, which is a bottle of Tanqueray gin with the security tag still on it. Yeah, so that's going to get returned to his next season.
Oh dear. Have you tried getting amazing. One off?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. It's a bit messy, and you end up with a lot of broken glass in your gin and tonic, usually.
I can tell you from experience, the only way to do it properly is just with a hammer.
Oh, right. Okay.
Literally take the top off and drink the whole lot.
Good.
Chris, what have you got?
So I found a beer on my travels and searches for podcast drinks, which is called Hunter's Premium, and it's got a picture of a big old sort of stag on the front, from Hunter's Brewery, which is in the heart of the Devon countryside. So Ipplepen down in Devon. It's actually really nice. So yeah, it's how do they describe it here? A smooth, warming, and sweet ale. But I thought it was really appropriate. I found a beer that was applicable. It says Hunters in the name, so I thought, well, that's got to feature on the podcast, seeing as I've had most drinks. And Sam, a lemsip has appeared on the podcast before, so unfortunately not the first time. Well, yeah, but yeah, Hunter's Premium Light Amber Bitter from Hunter's Brewery in Devon. It's very good.
Excellent.
And George, what are you on?
Well, I'm on beer as well. I've talked about this brewery before on the podcast, and I thought since I got a fellow Hampshire lad on, I'd better have a Hampshire beer. This is Gooden's Gold, a golden ale from the Flower Pots Brewery over in Cheriton. It's actually owned by a mate of mine, Sam. You'll have met Nick before shooting with us. He bought it 2020, sort of right at the beginning of lockdown. He was shooting with us early this year, and he said that they're expanding the brewing operation there. It's all going really, really well. So I'm just keen to support it. And it's a lovely beer, ice cold from the fridge. And then for when I finished that, I've got my trusty Speyside single malt to fall back on, as I inevitably will finish this pint before we finished recording.
Enjoy.
I shall. Good. Right. Okay. So let's move swiftly on and get straight on to our listener correspondence. We've got Whose Bird Is It Anyway, Sam? And this is where we ask our listeners to send in their shooting quandaries and queries and dilemmas, and we try to resolve them. So this submission comes from somebody I'm going to call Gilbert. And Gilbert writes, on a typical day last season, one of the long-standing members who I've known for a number of years brought his son along, aged about 11, to share the peg with him. Nothing unusual about that. Now, normally, one associates sharing a peg with one gun shooting the first drive and then alternating each drive with the other gun. It was noted on one drive by the host that once the young lad had taken his shots, his father would then have a shot whilst the lad was reloading, in effect double gunning. Once the drive had finished, the shoot host had a quiet word with the father as it had been mentioned by another gun. Once the next and final drive commenced, I was eagerly awaiting the bird's arrival over the line when I noticed that Dad was storming up and down the line and appeared to be shouting at a number of guns, all whilst birds were coming over the line and shooting was taking place. Once the drive ended, Dad then stormed over to me asking if I was to blame for ruining his day's shooting, as apparently shooting with my son isn't allowed. Once back at the estate yard, Dad then questioned whether the bag had actually been attained and asked for all the birds to be laid out and counted. This obviously spoilt the end to a great day, and the rest of the team were clearly embarrassed by the dad's behaviour. However, some of the guns thought he should have been allowed to shoot like this on the peg with his son. The gun in question has not reappeared this season on the syndicate. There's no doubt that his behaviour after being spoken to by the host was not only distasteful but dangerous. However, the question remains, was the host in the right for having a word about double gunning, or should he have been allowed to continue with his son? In addition, how would you have helped with the subsequent behaviour?
Oh, people do find them, don't they?
Crikey.
I know.
This is pod at Guns on Peg. Just keep piling them in. We'll give it our best shot. But bloody hell, I mean, this is fairly extreme, isn't it?
It does sound a bit like the dad's gone off the deep end a little bit. Sam, have you have sort of dads and sons bringing people along at the farm shoot, don't you?
Yeah, we do. And I mean, personally, and you guys won't want to hear this, but it sounds like the perfect reason why you shouldn't sell days. But but yeah, poor form. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I ended up in a situation a couple of years ago where I shot as a guest on a day that someone had bought, and I had it's a bit different, but I had a back gun stood behind me, and he came up. And you know, despite what George says, I am crap. And he came up to me at the end and said, "Well, that was pretty unfair." He said, I've always been told, you know, if you've got a back gun behind you, for every bird you shoot, you then leave the next one." And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but I've never heard that before." And I said, "You know, even the best guns will shoot 2-1, so you've got just as much shooting as I have." And but it's funny, some people just gauge it so wrong, and maybe where there's money involved, I don't know. But yeah, no. Poor form, and if an 11-year-old son should have been, his dad should have been all over him trying to help him and make sure he's safe and everything. But yeah.
So there's a bunch of issues in here, isn't there? Because I mean, there's his dad's reaction, which we must take into context the importance and the amount of pre-excitement he would have been playing out in his mind about having his son on his first day shooting. Was it?
Well, it sounds like it.
I mean, look. If for the last 11 years of his son's life, he would have been looking forward to this day. So we must have that in context. However, it doesn't matter how excited you are, you don't act like that.
Yeah.
So I think we're in firm agreement there. But the issue comes with, as ever, and it's always the way with this, isn't it? A lack of communication over what's right and wrong to do in this situation in advance of the day. Presumably before the first drive, they would have known these guys were sharing a peg, right?
Yeah, I'd have thought so, yeah.
I mean, that's the time you approach this. You say, well, when you're sharing a peg, this is what we expect and don't expect. So, you know, please be aware of others and everyone else. And as you say, Sam, if it's a syndicate and they're paying their own way, money's always the first cracker to cause a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, so there's two things, right? I think the dad has a responsibility to teach his son well. I mean, Sam's mentioned the safety side of thing and making sure that his son's safe. So actually, if you're shooting while your son's reloading, you want to be, you know, that's a dangerous moment, that reloading moment. Is he closing the gun correctly? All that stuff. So he's obviously not paying attention there. And then to go charging off down the line because you're cross is hardly setting a good example to your lad either. And then there's a completely separate question as to whether that kind of double gunning thing when sharing a peg is right or not.
Well, I think that's the first question here, which is sort of what this person's not expected and therefore emailed in about. And my opinion, straight to the point on that, is double gunning. There's double gunning in normal terms mean one person being in charge of essentially 2 guns, 2 triggers, or 4, depending on what gun you use. Anyway, the point being that if 2 people are in charge of pulling trigger on the same peg, you know, within a couple of feet of each other, that's dangerous. It's going to cause a problem because, and you might think, oh no, I can be perfectly safe. It's when you go, has he shot? Is he going to load now? And you stretch across him and you get excited in the heat of the moment and chase a bird. You might, you know, fall over each other, bash barrels, whatever. You know, that's just asking for trouble. And for me, both of you shooting and sharing shots on the same peg is is not good. I don't know. What do you guys think to that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a bit like the age-old thing. I remember on a beaters day here once, and one of the old boys turned up with a semi-auto, and it was that kind of like, oh well, it's only 3 shots. Yeah, but it's still 50% more than anyone else, mate.
Yeah, well, I mean that's another very good point, though, Sam. Is that there is obviously money exchanging hands. It sounds like it's a syndicate. They are sort of getting more than or they've got sort of the potential to fire more frequently than any other peg, which doesn't seem quite fair either.
No, exactly. And I think, like you say, the big elation for the father of, my son's going to shoot his first bird, and that's a heck of a moment. But actually, it's no, it's
actually not. If that's the case, though, which, let's be honest, he was definitely thinking that way. Then if you're the dad, and Sam, you've got children. We've got children, but they're very young. But if you're the dad and you've got this excitement for your son's first day, then why are you so eager to pop off a load of shots yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly.
A very good point. And I've just remembered as well another bit of it. He's then asked whether the bag has been shot.
Yes.
Yeah, what a dickhead. Sorry.
Don't hold back, Chris.
Well, he is, isn't he? I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's more to this than we haven't seen, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't mean his actions are okay. So there's the different issues. One, in terms of if you're thinking about sharing pegs with someone, and by the way, I'm a big advocate of sharing a peg with someone for the main reason that I love to be next to someone and chat through the drive and just share the day with someone else, right? So if you're going to share a peg with someone, I agree with what whoever you've called this person, Gilbert, you've called him. I agree there that it kind of should be alternate drives. I think it's the safest way of doing it. Sometimes with my dad, when we were younger, we sort of do, you've got 10 shots, and if you miss everything, then you've got to give the gun over type thing. But at least one gun's on the floor, one gun's in the air, that type of thing. So I don't know about you guys, but I think that's probably the extreme there, like just try and do alternate drives.
Yeah, if you both feel the need to shoot one drive, then there should only ever be one gun unsleeved, I think, probably.
Yeah.
Or a very clear understanding that only one gun will ever be loaded at any given moment, and that there'll be a clear moment where you go, right, let's swap. Other than that, I'd say that swapping drives is the best thing to do. So
to summarize, was the host right for having a word about double gunning? Yes. As I think we're in 100% agreement with. Should he been allowed to continue with his son? Yes, but on the basis that we've outlined, I think is probably the general consensus of the shooting world on this one. And how would you have helped with his subsequent behaviour? I would have told him that was simply unacceptable.
Sam?
But I mean, I probably would have chickened out. Sam, what would you have done? You're the farm shoot host in this situation.
Yeah, no, I think the long and short of it is, no matter how you feel, do you want 3 blokes to be sat on a podcast talking about it in 6 months' time? Don't be a twat.
I mean, Sam, you have summarised the answer to a lot of these "Whose Bird is it anyways?" which is don't be a twat. A lot of the resolutions to this. But I mean, I think if I'm running this syndicate, this guy's getting his money back and being told not to come back. Thanks very much.
Yeah, quite agree. It says a lot that he didn't come back the next year, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, there is that, exactly. Hey ho, good. Well, thank you for Gilbert for sending that one.
Yeah, that's another one ticked off.
But
there's Chris, more to come. I mean, it feels like we've kind of done one already. But have you got an unpopular opinion for us this week?
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing unpopular about that chap's opinion, was there? But there's definitely about this one. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready, Sam? So this one comes from someone that we're going to call Aubrey in our list of making up names. He says, with the transition away from lead shot, is it time that the owners of the old English guns got with the program, moved with the times, and retired those guns to the mantelpiece?
Oh, yeah, that's gonna wind a few people up.
It's definitely unpopular with a large number of people, but let's debate it all the same.
So Sam, you don't use a particularly old gun, do you, Sam?
I don't know. I can't warrant anything decent or vintage. So no, I've got a blood and guts gun that lives 7 months behind the tractor seat, and then then comes out for a few sporadic days.
Proper farm shoot gun. I love it.
How many nails have you hammered in with
it? Yeah, no, good point. Yeah.
I found the other acid test is: do you row the boat with it as well? Do you sort of twist it round and stick it in the rollock?
I've tested a few electric fences with it.
So go on then, Sam. Give us your verdict on this one. Where would you be leaning? Should these old English guns be retired, given where we're heading? Yes or no?
Yeah, no. I think that hopefully we've got enough shooting left, and a lot of these old English guns warrant the proofing or whatever needs to be done. So no, far too young to go on the mantelpiece for me, and I'd rather see some money spent there in the gunsmiths than them hung up. And these old boys need to carry on anyway.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, George. Where are you leaning on this one?
Well, listeners will be aware that I'm a devotee of the side-by-side. I can't claim to have an old English gun, sadly. But actually, as it happens, I was shooting with a mate this weekend whose dad owns a pair of Purdy's that were his father's or grandfather's or something like that. But this friend of mine was using a modern over and under. And as we've already alluded to, it was an incredibly wet day. And I think if you do, and this is what my mate was saying, is that, if you've got an old English gun, the tolerances are so tight and that they're such sort of precision engineered, crafted things that actually they can be a bit unreliable sometimes. And, you certainly wouldn't want to be taking them out on an incredibly wet day, a little bit of mud in the wrong place, and you're faced with a huge repair bill. And I think that particularly when it comes to the steel thing, if you're going to be on the sort of day where you're going to be firing 50, 100 cartridges, 200 cartridges, I think I'd be thinking twice about taking my Purdy's or my Hollands or whatever in any case. And certainly if you're going to be using big loads, I think I'd be pretty nervous about that. I think that there's probably a time and a place for using them, and you'll still be able to find those times and places, and that something a bit more modern might stand you in good stead in the long run in any case. It's probably the case that these people who've got these in the cabinet have got a backup in anyway. My gun, as I've explained before, isn't suitable for high-performance steel. It's only suitable in one barrel for standard steel. So I'm going to have to make some sort of change, but I will be looking for a side-by-side that is
a bit
suitable.
A bit more accurate.
Well, I don't think I can blame the gun, Sam.
Okay, two things for listeners' benefit, for those that aren't totally clued up on the subject. I must just explain what George just said there. So high-performance steel, there's two types of steel cartridge. You've got high-performance steel and standard steel. High-performance steel can only be used in for simplest argument's sake, the most modern of guns, okay? At this stage, you need to go and check. And the other thing he was alluding to is choke, and steel is advised only to be used in anything wider than half choke. So if you've got 3/4 or full inch or super full or whatever, then you shouldn't be using steel through that. So that's what George was alluding to there. I think your advice was very good. I think you know what I'm going to say here, because I might have said it before.
Well, you're going over to the dark side, aren't you?
Well, no, you see, I've got an 1895 Henry Atkins, Sam, but it has some modern barrels on it, so it can take steel. So it's kind of done what actually I think anyone who owns 1895 Henry Atkin or anything similar should do, which is, if you love it, go and change the barrels. And I understand that. Like standing there with my old English side-by-side on the peg, I love. You spend half the time looking at it. You much more time looking at it than you do firing it, let's be honest. And so I get it. However, the problem is more about the fashions in shooting and then the ammo that we're going to be putting through them. Steel cartridges kick a bit more. I think end of story on that point. They do kick a bit more. You'll notice it in a lighter weight side-by-side more so than you would in a newer, heavier over and under. But I think where I was going with this is I feel that we're in that sort of phase that the sort of classic car market went through about 30 years ago.
Okay, I'm interested where you're going here. Go on then.
Okay, look, I don't know if you know anyone that's got a Jaguar E-Type, right? But like you see them about. I think there's two categories there. One, I'm going to look after it, maintain it as best I can, and it might make its way out on a summer Sunday lunchtime to the local pub. That category. Then there's the other one that spends more than it would ever have cost to buy something fantastic, and spends it on the car to make it like you could drive it to Glasgow and back for a meeting. That type of E-Type. It's basically not an E-Type anymore, right? Okay. And I think that the guns are in that category. You can go and spend a fortune on your old gun and essentially modernize it. It's still not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a Tesla, right? Or you can just accept that old gun was built for a purpose that we kind of don't really have anymore. But look, let's say it's built for Hampshire pastures, right? Which is quite likely. That it's still going to be good for. But if you want to take it to a high bird shoot in Devon or Wales, you're going to be found slightly undergunned. So I think you just need to accept the time and the place for those guns and have something else in your locker. That's my feeling on this.
Yeah, I think that. What gun does your dad use, Sam?
He went to the dark side maybe 5 or 6 years ago actually, and has now got a silver pigeon, as we all do, the Ford Fiesta of the Hampshire shooting world. Sorry, nothing against Beretta, sorry, but
no, but it makes me laugh how everyone calls it the dark side. Why? Like, is that just us, or is
that's me being a
snob?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I know, but there's a lot of people who say that, maybe because they used it side by side once back in the day.
You must remember, Chris, George is on the upper side of Winchester, and I am very much, lower Winchester.
Fair enough.
So, Chris, what's your plan then?
Okay, so I've bought a Rizzini this year. And the reason I've bought a Rizzini is having used steel cartridges through my Henry Atkin for 2 seasons now, I can see where that gun with those steel cartridges is to be used. And it's actually quite a lot of shoots. It's more often than you would think. But there's many times where I would like to put something a little bit bigger, slightly more ethical, potentially, through the barrel.
Yeah.
And therefore that Rizzini is going to probably be my go-to gun more often than not.
Okay, so your Henry Atkin's not going above the mantelpiece, but it is going to have its workload reduced.
And it needs to maintain its life.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you the number of times that I've stood in a peg and watched the ejector fly out with the cartridge. It's not supposed to happen. And it's expensive. I think what Aubrey's getting at here is that there's some people who are very vocal saying we absolutely, at all costs, need to maintain the English gun market and be everything we produce has to be suitable for these forever going forward. I think that's an unpopular opinion. I think that's unsustainable. Shooting can't move with the times and do that at the same time. That's impossible.
Interesting.
Have I got that right?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think those guns were probably outdated 50 years ago. Well, 30 years ago at any rate. They were, I don't know when the cult of extreme high bird shooting came about exactly, but when people started shooting at things that were 40, 50 yards up, then those guns were outdated. They had a half-life on them at that point, I think, probably.
And then when we move to steel, they become really outdated.
Yeah. Right. Well, okay. So Gilbert and Aubrey, and now you, Sam, are now members of the most noble order of the Garters and will shortly be in receipt of your very own sets of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock Garters. If you too have got a shooting confession, a quandary, or a query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you've got an unpopular opinion that you'd like to share, and you'd like a set of Garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com. Now, before we move on very quickly, Chris, you shared a dilemma of your own with us in the previous episode. What's the status? Are you going to, was it Glen Eagles?
Yeah, so that was literally a text during the last episode. Got invited to an amazing day, Sam, up at Glen Eagles, it sounds like. And given that I've got a new baby, and leaving my other half for a whole weekend is now quite a negotiation. I shared it with George and Toby, our guests. Anyway, they both advised. Well, George said don't go, and Toby was like, "Send me." so, anyway, the dilemma is solved. I'm going, which is
and so is she.
Very slightly nerve-wracking. That would be wise, but no, she's not. Flo isn't coming.
No, I meant she's leaving you.
Well, no. So the reason I'm going is because I need to give a massive shout out to my mother-in-law, who is absolutely stepping in to save my bacon here. She's coming to stay to help Flo with our very only few weeks old baby, and therefore she is an absolute hero to me in this situation, because she's essentially made it possible for me to go shooting in Scotland for the weekend. And it made me think that, like, it's not the first time that someone has deserved a bit of a shout out for something that might have allowed someone to go shooting, or for something to happen, take place, or be amazing. And I kind of think there might be something in this, that my mother-in-law, Sally, deserves the first sort of shooting hero moment of allowing me to take my day. I feel that there's going to be listeners who think we've got like a keeper or a beater or a host or a mate of mine or whatever, that they could stake a claim for being getting a mention on the pod for being a shooting hero. What do you reckon?
I really like that, actually. So hang on, who's so the person gets a shout out, the hero gets a shout out, and the person who sends in their name gets some garters. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, so it's just, I hadn't even got to that bit. You're absolutely right. Who gets the garters? So
I'm not picturing my mother-in-law in garters.
This is a good point, Sam. Right, garters. I think, obviously the person that sends in definitely gets them. We do 2 pairs of garters, and the person that gets nominated for being a hero gets a set of garters without realising. I like that.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so pod@gunsonpegs.com. If there's somebody in your shooting world who you feel is deserving of recognition, they may have done something like step into the breach to do some babysitting so that you can go shooting. They might be, the volunteer shoot captain on your syndicate who's put in 30 years of hard graft. They might be the picker-up who turns up every week come rain, snow, sun, or hail, that kind of thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these, actually, because I think they could be interesting.
The only problem is we might end up, if we get a few of them, we're going to have too many to read out. But hey, that's a different problem. Good. Well, I'm glad I got that one in, and also publicly thank you to my mother-in-law, Sally. I'm going to Glen Eagles.
I hope you've bought her a bottle of something nice as well.
Oh, it will be sorted out, don't worry.
Great. Okay, right, Sam. Obviously, I know a fair bit about the shoot that you run. For our listeners, can you tell us a bit about the farm and some of the things that you've got going on there alongside the farming, and what farming operations you've got, and then a little bit about the shooting as well? So let's start with what's going on the farm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a family farm. I'm what am I? I think I'm 5th generation. I'm 3rd generation here just this side of Winchester. We farm. It's a smallish farm. I've got some big neighbours around me, so we're the allotment in the middle. But we farm arable crops, wheats, barleys. We grow niche crops as well. So we've a bit like George's family have in the past, grow poppies for morphine production. We grow herbs and grain for seed and seed. Grass for seed as well. So lots of little niche bits. We've got what have we got? We've got, my wife does some glamping on the farm, which is a kind of couple of years old now, and that's kind of planned for expansion as well. So that's going quite well. A bit like George's soon-to-be sister-in-law has just got into. So they've nicked our idea and run with it and made a much better job of it.
Down the road, in your catchment area.
Exactly.
The sincerest form of flattery, Sam.
Yeah, but I fear they might soon get a letter from the council, so never mind. But it's so we do that, and then we've got a self-storage business. We've got about 700 self-storage units on the farm run by run by the office here. We've got a MOT centre and service centre, offices, workshops, and then we've got a 32,000 free-range hens for egg production. So
you've got a bit of everything.
So we're doing well. If you can't do anything well, you do lots of things, don't you? And I keep ballsing things up, so I have a go at something else. But,
the first question I want to ask is something that reminded me. Shoots that have quite big arable operations inevitably end up with just constant issues with arable production versus, hoovering up partridges instead of carrots type scenario. Is that something that comes up a lot?
Sure. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. No, we're 100%. We're a farm that shoots, not a shoot that farms, and the shooting. To me, I'm just making sure the keeper's not snuck in, but to me, no, the shooting comes very low down, and because I'll explain in a minute, but we keep it very basic. No one expects a lot, and it's just good fun. But but no, we do. I mean, I must admit, I lost, I think, about 2 foot down the side of a rape crop this year, and I was absolutely distraught. And then I went to a friend who reckons he's lost 100 acres to the partridge and didn't feel so bad after all. So I know what you mean. But also I'll come on to talk about the chap who kind of does our gamekeeping, but he's also our tractor driver as well. So we don't have any of this. You're driving on my bloody crops and your birds are eating all my bloody corn. And
I imagine that's got to be one of the hardest parts, managing those relationships. Yeah. If you're a leased-based shoot on a highly productive A1 farm.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's you hear of it everywhere really, which is another thing that puts me off ever doing anything commercial really.
But you're making all the decisions, so you got it under control.
Well, quite right, all the wrong decisions, but yeah.
And so, tell us about the shoot.
So the shoot is I think about 58, 59 years old or something. So grandfather bought the farm here in 1960, and father then started doing a few bits. And actually, I've dug out the old game book, which doesn't quite go back to when it started. This is the second one. The first one, unfortunately, temporarily lost at the moment. But it's interesting, and it goes back to some pretty serious days. Well,
give us an extract from an early day in there.
So one to note is the 15th of December 1983, where
my gun was old at that point still.
You'll get and a certain Simon Brown,
that's my dad,
was also present on a day where the bag was 13 at pit and 7 at a neighbouring bit of ground that they used to go over as well. So a total of 20. The comments for the day were bloody wet, one snipe seen. not shot, and I don't think the snipe's ever been seen in Hampshire, but one snipe seen. And the other comment on the day was in 1983, December 1983. I'd have been 4 months old. And it says, Sam circumcised in hospital today. So that was the only comment of the
day. That's a blinding way to end a day, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no comment. I'm glad they missed me. Yeah.
Okay, so Sam, it's obviously had sort of fairly humble beginnings, but I shot with you early this season. I think we shot 120 odd, did we? Not that I contributed very many, but
I thought you were going to big it up a bit.
It would have been more if it hadn't been me.
Yeah. So the biggest change was when we took on another tractor driver probably 7 or 8 years ago who was quite keen on his gamekeeping, and I said, look, do not confuse this with a gamekeeping job, but if you want 25% of the time, we can try and push the shoot on, and I'll allow you to disappear for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, and go and dog a few birds in, and actually it's worked really well. And chap who is called Trump, who's fairly popular around these parts,
No relation.
or unpopular with our neighbours, is he runs the birds, and it works really well. So we have only, I mean, it's literally, I feel embarrassed to be on here. I'm honoured, but embarrassed to be sat here talking about it. But it's we have maximum 7-8 days, usually 7. Which start not particularly early, although the introduction of the partridge a few years ago have made it, have completely changed the shoot. It used to be like most farm shoots, half a dozen beaters get to the last 10 yards of the cover crop, and the sky goes black with 3 pheasants, and and now you get 4 partridge before the 3 pheasants, which is made a big difference. But it's no, it's great. And so we've got there wasn't a single tree on the farm when Father came here in 1960. So everything, all the new shelter belts and everything are brand new. I've planted a lot since I've been back kind of 12, 15 years ago. And so not particularly warm farm, very high as well. And so we struggle early, and we need the birds to kind of, we haven't got any big woods really, so we tend to shoot a little bit later. I know that sounds kind of the wrong way around, but and it's good. And we've shot this season, it goes down as most kind of crap shoots do. We started about 150, 60, and then knock 10 or 15 off each time. And so but we always put our beaters day in probably nearly halfway through the season, because I always get a bit embarrassed when we've shot some really nice days and they shoot 12 at the end. So
that's good of you.
So we've already had that was a couple of weeks ago, and they had a good day of 100 or so, and so nice. And as I say, the partridge have changed it dramatically, and it's good fun. There's nothing commercial, there's nothing high, but it's just good fun.
Well, I think you're underselling it a bit there, Sam. There was some partridges when I was there the other week that were a good way up. I mean, you've got a bit of contour there, haven't you?
Yeah, no, we have, and with a bit of wind, actually, the partridge can be great fun. And they're actually, Hampshire partridge are about my favourite. It's especially with cut hedges now, you can throw them over these hedges and they can be bloody good fun.
I've been meaning to ask, so there's 2 things you said that stuck out to me already, which we must come back to. One is the shelter belt point. And the reason I say that is on the last pod, we had an unpopular opinion, which was that he was sort of saying he doesn't feel that a lot of the small shoots do that much for conservation. And we were sort of saying, we don't think that's correct. We think you do a lot more than you might realise. And you've just absolutely alluded to it straight away. It's kind of, when you say planting the shelter belts over the years, it's probably seen as just something you do because you have the farm, not necessarily because of shooting, but it's obviously in part because of that, right? So what do you think about that opinion that these smaller shoots aren't doing much for conservation, given where you're at?
Absolutely. No, I think that's right. And I think you're right. A lot of the time we forget what we're doing, and whether it's hedgerow management, whether it's plantings. We've done a lot of planting in our 40-acre chicken range that we've got now. We planted about 7,000 or 8,000 trees last year, and you know what? Done in a way they could have been random here, there, and everywhere, but they've possibly been done in a way that might mean my kids can have a bit of fun later on in a few years' time. So, but no, we're always, I mean, whether we've been in little schemes, countryside stewardship schemes, environmental management stuff, and actually no, we're always, everything's always done with we've actually come out of some of the schemes and we haven't rolled into new ones yet, but we've kept all our margins, all our field corners, wild bird strips, and actually just because, you know what, I think I'm number 4 or 5 here, and I don't want to bugger it up. So, and I think it's, it's what you do if you're kind of a custodian of somewhere for my kids.
And you alluded to the size of your shoot, saying you felt a bit awkward about it on this sense, but there's thousands of shoots at your size.
Absolutely,
literally thousands. Yeah. It's probably maybe 1 or 2 days more, but it's probably the most popular size of shoot that there is. Even though so much of the airtime goes to these bigger shoots.
Yeah.
But the fact is that there's people in your shoes wondering, how to make a better fist from a conservation point of view, how to make sure the shoot still complements the farm, and so on, all the time. I mean, it's probably the biggest area.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sounded embarrassed because we're very, we're very privileged to have the opportunity to do this kind of stuff, and actually, you know what. When COVID struck, for instance, I didn't have to make 20 awkward phone calls, and it was, it was quite nice. In fact, most people sounded quite relieved when I told them we'd cancelled. But it's.
But Sam, I mean, there's going to be a fair few people listening to this who maybe dream of having a little DIY syndicate, or think they might have a bit of ground that they could get access to, that they might like to start a shoot on. So I know from our experience here that one of the key things is trying not to make it too expensive a thing, because it's a bit of a luxury. What would be your tips for kind of keeping the costs down on a small shoot like yours or like ours?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, for us, it's worked really well that this chap who is he's 50% tractor driver, he's 25% welder fabricator, kind of workshop guy, and then he does runs the shoot, and that's made a huge difference. The farm swallows the cost, and a lot of the I probably shouldn't say this, but a lot of the environmental schemes now allow you to be quite flexible with cover crops, catch crops, cover crops, wild bird strips, some of which, some of the wild birds might include a few partridge, and it's so for us it works really well, and actually it's about managing expectations, and it's a classic on all of these days that the only person that's worried about the day is the host, isn't it? No one else cares, especially if they're not there. They've been invited. It's a day out. No one cares what happens, whether it rains or you shoot 20 or 30 or 230. And I think we've just all got to relax and enjoy it, really. I mean, we've got our challenges with trying to do it, even on a small scale here, but we've got the poultry, which is we have a bit of a biosecurity issue in terms of keeping the pheasants and the chickens separate, especially with bird flu rife at the moment, which is very worrying. We've got footpaths crossing the farm in 3 or 4 different places, and we've got excuse me, various bits and bobs all going on, and as well as probably 200 cars coming through the farmyard every day, which doesn't help. But actually, one of the I was talking to the keeper a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "I've got to get around these partridge there," and he's proper Hampshire. He talks to me like this, and I said, he said, "I've got to get right out around that boundary there, all the way out there down in the village," and blah blah blah. And I went on the CCTV and I showed him, and in our self-storage container yards, which have got, I don't know, a couple of hundred containers in a big compound, and the partridge just sit in the middle of these self-storage yards in the middle of the farm, and because they've had the sun on the containers and it's sheltered, it's warm, and so I said, "Look, I think you're going a bit over the top with your beating. I think you just need to go and bang on a few tin boxes, and I think they'll all take off." No, there's more to it than that.
So that's your top tip for anybody looking to run a small shoot. Get a few containers, and you'll know where your partridges are all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Quite right.
Right. So the first point you mentioned was it was essentially you managed to hire this guy who sounds pretty integral on the basis that he's satisfying a bit of his passion because he wants to be involved in the keeping side, but you've managed to support him financially because he's involved in the shoot. So that's your sort of money saving expert tip number one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it would be different if we, speaking openly, it'd be different if we didn't have non-farming things to support it. I don't think we'd be, I think I can probably go to my neighbour and buy a day at the end of the season, or a couple of days cheaper than I can do it myself. But actually, I don't find any enjoyment in that. And there's something really special. I mean, George knows this, and about being able to do it on your own doorstep. And it's it's very.
So just to follow up to that then. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking of taking on a bit of ground, i.e. leasing from a farm like you,
Yeah,
let's say the shooting
sure.
rights came up.
Shooting
So you
rights.
didn't have the luxury of being able to absorb this guy's cost into the farm. Do you think that is a massive hurdle that's very difficult to overcome? You've got to sort of just think creatively.
I do. No, it's a. I mean, fortunately, I've been spoilt and had it. Had these things available. But no, I mean the synergy between the farm and the farm staff and the shoot and the keeper, whether he be part time or whatever, is absolutely. I mean, it's so easy. You can, if you wanted to ruin someone's day as a tractor driver or a farm manager or something, it's pretty easy. And as a keeper, you can do the same as well. So I think that relationship is absolutely key and something we're so spoiled to have because we've got it all in house. But I think going buying shooting rights and trying to set up a DIY syndicate or even sold days, people make it work. And credit to them, but it must be hard work trying to keep a lot of people happy. And
That's interesting, and a word of caution from you then. So, it sounds like actually, if let's suppose for a second you'd let your shoot out, that you'd let the shooting rights out, and someone came, the tenant came to you and said, "Look, we'd like to invest in someone for a bit of support for the shoot. We'll happily subsidise some of his costs, and you can get a bit of a farm worker for cheap. Would you be interested?" Type thing. It sounds like the relationship and everything else is absolutely critical.
No, entirely. And it's I mean, there are very few people like that. I know, especially these days, that the agricultural operator's job is very technical, and actually it takes quite a different breed of person who actually wants to get off the combine and go and dog in partridge and stuff like that.
So it's getting harder and harder to do that.
Yeah, I would say it is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tough.
Sam, you alluded to the introduction of the partridge a few years ago, and I know that it's made a huge difference to our shoot here. But what was behind the thinking there? How did you come to that decision, and how long ago was it?
I think it was back before this current chap started, actually. So probably 10 years ago, and actually you'll remember this, George, with your brother Jim. We went down to the Game Conservancy at Fordingbridge and did the part-time keepers course, which was, I think, 2 days, and we made it to about half a day and then found a good pub. But it was really good with Mike Swan, and who was an absolute star. And what a guy. And and actually, I think I went with this burning desire that I wanted to make our 3-minute drives last 6 minutes, and and he helped me see the light. And so I came home, reared 200 or 300 partridge myself that first season, and actually found that the returns weren't half as good as the pheasants, or maybe not quite as good as the pheasants, but actually they were bloody good fun. And off our valleys, I know some of my father's friends who might be slightly purist turn around quite often when we've thrown them. I mean, our shoot, the other thing I should say is our shoot is on a postage stamp. It's probably, although the farm's 500 acres or so, we shoot over probably about 200 acres. And it's so we do a very good job of putting you in a car or a gun bus or something and driving you around the farm, and then but most people realise that they're 25 yards from where they were stood in the last drive.
It's a classic technique.
It is, yeah. The long way around the estate.
Adding the partridges. I mean, something you just said was that your neighbours didn't necessarily. You suggested they're purists, and they thought it wasn't necessarily the right thing, right?
Well, no, I think they were just possibly saying that they thought we were very fortunate. He said your partridge are very forgiving, and I think that's because he said, I think I've shot at the same one 5 times now. And when you've got a valley, like, or with the farm is called Vale Farm, and it's got this small valley that runs through the middle, and we are able to push them, a few times back and forth, and it's not for everyone, but but it's great, and it's been a real change. So now we've probably put down, I think last season, 1,600 partridge and 500 pheasants, and we've got some neighbours that shoot as well. And although we don't, I only drop that in because they've got some big shoots, but actually no drives anywhere near us, and we don't really benefit. But yeah, no, it's really changed it, and the partridge are great fun, and it's meant we can stretch the season and the drive slightly.
Shoots often talk about really struggling with their returns on the partridges, and you allude to that as well. So that's a word of caution if you're a shoot that just puts down pheasants at this stage. But as you say, the reason for doing it was totally different. It's just that it was the experience on the day.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's a yeah, it's a very different thing, and I know a neighbour of ours who advised me a little bit when we were putting in some partridge drives and some cover, said you just got to accept that the more you put down, the less you'll shoot, and I think that's right. And also the horror. I mean, our beating line, an average age of maybe. I think I worked it out last night. It's late 60s anyway for the beating line, and which is brilliant. And they're all great and have been. They've been here longer than I have. But I remember 10 years ago on the first day of the season where we put these partridge down, handing them a flag each, and how I didn't end up with 9 of them shoved up my arse, I don't know. What do you expect me to do with this then?
It's not as simple as just walking through and tapping a tree anymore.
But so the decision's mostly about what's right for the ground, right? It's to make that shift to partridges. It's it's not necessarily what you're going to hold. It's what's going to present the most enjoyable shooting.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know when I was doing the keeper, so before this guy Trump came probably 8 years ago, I was doing it all myself. It was the kind of it was the low intensive farming side of gamekeeping kind of thing. It was if I could tip a trailer up and leave a heap of wheat, then that was as good as feeding for me probably. But and when I was doing it, it was it was what we could put down and what we could hold. But actually, you can have some real fun playing around with these things, but it's a completely different. I mean, we're not professionals at all, and we've had to really learn it the hard way. But you have to completely think about it. When people start saying, "Oh, you want to push that one uphill next time," and you think, Christ, well, for 53 years we pushed it downhill. I'm not bloody doing that. But yeah, it's all about the topography, and it's how low you can get the guns, not how high you can get the birds, isn't it?
Have you changed the shoot much then from these sort of learnings over the years, or has it just remained sort of as it is because there's no pressure and therefore it can?
Yeah, no. We, I'd love to say I've completely transformed it, but I've done bugger all. I mean, the game strips are in pretty much the same place. We've added two new drives and 2 or 3 new bits of cover elsewhere, just to try and bring partridge in from a little bit further away. But it's incredible for us how we used to get into this kind of 24 meter wide, 150 yard long bit of cover. And you'd line up at the back and walk through it. And now the partridge come from walking a bit of wheat that's only an inch tall, that's 100 acres away, bringing that towards you. And it's completely changed how we've had to do it, and we have had to probably go from 6 to nearly 10 beaters now, so at great expense.
So Sam, just to sort of round it off, what do you feel like the key to running a really great farm shoot is? And before you go any further, I want to say I class yours as a really great farm shoot.
Well, thanks, George. That's very kind, but you obviously need to get out more, I think. But no, back to what I said. It's about just the time that people are having. If I'm comfortable and if we're comfortable, they're comfortable. No one's got any expectations. Everything's a bonus, and it's just about having a relaxed day. We start in the morning with a cup of coffee at the old man's house, and then we meet in the yard. Beaters, guns, all together. Beaters are all either guys from the farm or live locally in the village, and everyone knows each other. And it's a great thing with inviting friends and family as guests on the days, is that the beaters know them all, and everyone just pitches in, and it's great fun. So we do that. We shoot a couple of drives, maybe 3 drives, and then back to the farm workshop where everyone just is all wading in together. Partridge goujons, and then and a few sausages and sloe gins, and bits and bobs like that, and then back out for another couple of drives in the afternoon, and then finishes in my house with and George will know this, but we it's a pretty traditional dinner that we've always had, which is cold meat, loads of pickles, chutneys, stuff like that, and then we always jacket potatoes, and then we always have Christmas pudding. And the reason was that when I came back to the farm, Dad had recently moved my mother out, and and I wasn't with anyone at the time, so we needed to work out how the hell we sorted out a decent shoot day that we could all go out and eat, drink, and have a good day's shooting, and then come in and still have a decent meal. So it had to be something we could bung in the oven, and or a cold bit of meat from the day before, and then some jacket spuds that anyone could run back and throw in the Arga and come out. So that's where it came from there. And since then, it's moved on slightly, but actually the menu is very, very much the same, and everyone's just got used to it. And actually, the game book, shows that like your dad, George, has been coming for 40 years, and all the old man's friends have all been coming 40, 50 years plus, kind of thing. So it's great. But in terms of someone putting on the perfect farm shoot day, yeah, I think just informal, chill out, just and just have fun.
I think you nailed it there, because the traditions that you just alluded to, I bet, make up a lot of people's memories about the days they've been on with you. And I think if you are running that little syndicate or farm shoot, just make your mark in your own little way, and just allow people to have a fun time. And if you think cold meats and all the pickles and chutneys and whatever else, and the little signature Christmas pudding, just because, whatever it might be, do it. If that's what you like, do it, because it guarantees that you'll have a good time doing it, and that will rub off on anyone else. And as you say, you can then chill out. It's such good advice.
Exactly that. No, and I think you're right. And like any, whether you're doing it for financial reasons or not, it's about having that kind of unique selling point that people always remember, isn't it? And ours is that you're not going to shoot much, but you'll leave fed and watered. And the newest tradition is that my wife, who is a much better shot than myself, and George will.
Shout out to Min. She's a very good shot. She cleaned up a couple behind me.
And she comes and stands. She shoots. This is probably not for the purist either, but she stands behind the line. And my father, who does the little chit chat in the morning, still always jokes that if Min stood behind you, you've been deemed to be the worst shot. So that's why she stood behind George for a couple of shoots.
I noticed. I was going to say she was standing behind me most of the day, and I thought it was because she liked me, but no.
I love it. Again, a lovely little touch, and I think it just adds that camaraderie in the day, doesn't it?
No, it's great fun.
Right, so Sam, the way we like to finish these podcasts off is to ask our guests to describe their dream last ever shooting experience. We call it Desert Island shooting. So you've got one last day or weekend or week or length of time of your choosing, really. Money's no object. Logistics don't matter. Where are you going to go? What are you going to be doing? Who are you going to have with you?
Sure. So I suppose my answer should be that it's here at home shooting Hampshire hedgehoppers, but it's not. Bugger that. And I'm a tight bloody farmer, so I'm not paying for much shooting. But we do, for the last few years, probably 4 or 5 years now, we've as a group of us farmers locally from around here, we go to Scotland and have a week up there. Well, it's probably 4 or 5 days up there, near Blairgowrie on the Borland and White House estate.
Oh, yeah.
And we take a house, and all the wives come as well, which is great, and half a dozen of those shoot as well. And it's absolutely fantastic. We do a couple of a high bird day, which I usually spectate for and let my wife shoot. We do another day in the park, 2 evenings on the ducks, a morning on the geese, try and catch a fish, and it's just perfect, absolutely perfect. And so if I'm going out with a bang, then that's how I want to go.
Lovely.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, no, I very very spoiled, and if I wasn't so tight, I'd like to do more of it. But
Well, that's the point of desert island shooting. Just create that imagination in your head and just do it.
Yeah, and it's desert island shooting, so you can
Yeah.
go for a fortnight if you want.
Would you do that, or would that be too much?
well, if it's yeah, no, I don't know.
Give it a good go.
I wouldn't lie to it. I'd give it a good go, yeah, but yeah, I need to come down to the south coast. Is pretty tropical. Remember, we need some, I need some sunshine on my back.
Right. Well, Sam, that sounds great. Thanks so much for coming and joining us. You're a busy man, so thanks ever so much.
No, not at all. Absolute pleasure. I knew you must be desperate when I got the call. No, thank you both. No,
thanks for joining us.
Great. No, not at all. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Sam. Right, so before we go, as per usual, there is one final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or letting us know where you've been listening, or by sending us your unpopular opinions, or by letting us know about your shooting heroes. Just send us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we use it in the next episode or any future episode, you will get some garters. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another episode, but until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.